The school called the cops because I used my inhaler in class without permission. We were already running late for school when I realized I completely forgot to grab my asthma inhaler. The morning had been a chaotic blur of burnt toast, missing shoes, and my mother's rising temper. She was already backing out of the driveway, the tires crunching loudly against the gravel. I checked my jacket pockets, empty. My heart did a familiar, unpleasant stutter. Mom, wait! I yelled from the passenger seat. I left my albuterol. Her foot slammed on the brake. The car jerked to a halt. Her face instantly dropped into a scowl, the kind that meant I was about to pay for ruining her morning schedule. She turned to me, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Oh my god, not this pathetic hyperventilating act again. I need it, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I literally cannot leave the house without it. It wasn't an exaggeration. The pollen count was high, the morning air was crisp, and my chest was already feeling tight. If I went to school without it, I'd be at massive risk of a full respiratory collapse. I knew I had to go back inside. I reached for the door handle. Right before I pulled it, the central lock clicked. A heavy electronic buzz that echoed in the quiet cab of the SUV. Mom, let me out. No, she snapped, checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. I am not missing my 9 a.m. presentation because of your fake breathing disease. She shifted the car back into reverse. Panic spiked in my throat. I couldn't go to school empty-handed. I reached over, hit the manual unlock button on the door panel, and scrambled out before she could grab the hood of my jacket. I hit the driveway stumbling, catching my balance, and sprinted back toward the front door. I heard her car slam into park. The engine revved slightly as she took her foot off the pedal. Then came the sound of her heels clicking furiously against the concrete behind me. Staccato, angry. I knew this was about to get bad. I dashed upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time, and lunged into the bathroom. I started digging frantically through the medicine cabinet, pushing aside bottles of ibuprofen and half-empty tubes of toothpaste. Say goodbye to your car privileges, you dramatic psycho, she roared from the bottom of the stairs. I finally found it. The faded red plastic inhaler was shoved all the way in the back behind a box of Q-tips. Relief washed over me. I grabbed it and instinctively brought it to my lips to take a preventative puff, my chest already heaving from the sprint up the stairs. Her mouthpiece touched my lips. She grabbed my wrist, her nails against my skin. She ripped the inhaler out of my grasp. Mom, I need that, I screamed, stepping back. She held it up high above her head where I couldn't reach it, a smug, furious look on her face. My younger brother Sam had followed us inside. He stood in the doorway of the bathroom, his backpack hanging off one shoulder. Mom, she actually needs that, Sam said, his voice shaking a little. I saw her turn blue and saw her crack last month. It's terrifying. She didn't even look at him. She kept her eyes locked on me. So, you really think a little bit of bad air is going to hurt you? She shoved past me, marching over to the laundry room down the hall. I followed her, my chest tightening further from the stress and the exertion. She grabbed a commercial-grade aerosol bleach spray from the top shelf. It was the heavy-duty stuff she used for deep cleaning the grout, the kind that explicitly warned against using it in unventilated spaces. Before I could react, she turned around and started spraying it directly into the cramped bathroom. Hiss. Hiss, a thick chemical cloud filled the small space instantly. The smell was overpowering, sharp, clinical, and caustic. I felt my throat tighten instantly. It wasn't a slow build. It was a violent, involuntary plant. I dropped to my knees, burying my face in the fabric of my sweatshirt, coughing violently as the fumes burned their way down my windpipe and into my lungs. Mom, stop. I breathed, the words barely making it past my lips. She just laughed. A short, dual sound. Oh, give it a rest. You're fine, you absolute fraud. I stayed curled on the tile, my eyes watering, my lungs screaming for oxygen that wasn't laced with chlorine. Every breath felt like inhaling crushed glass. Please, I gasped. Just give me my inhaler. I could hear Sam panicking now. He dropped his backpack. She's not faking. Her lips are turning pale. Well, why hasn't she passed out yet? My mother shot back, staring down at me. Maybe the air isn't toxic enough. I just stayed on the floor, trying to take shallow, measured breath, praying she'd stop. The tile was cold against my forehead. I closed my eyes and focused on trying to force air through a straw that felt like it was shrinking by the second. Then she sighed dramatically. All right, fine. Here's your stupid medicine. I opened my eyes and looked up. She wasn't holding the red plastic inhaler. She was holding a heavy industrial ozone generator. She had bought it weeks ago to clear out some basement mildew. It was a metal box the size of a car battery, designed to pump out concentrated, pure ozone, a gas that destroys organic matter and is incredibly dangerous to inhale directly. She plugged its thick black cord directly into the bathroom wall outlet. She flipped the switch. The machine hummed to life. I instantly felt a wave of sharp metallic gas flood the room. It smelled like electrical fire and thunderstorms, but 100 times more concentrated. It hit the back of my throat like a physical punch. I collapsed flat against the bath mat, crying, fighting for oxygen, my hands clutching my chest. Sam was sobbing too. Mom, stop it. I'm calling 911. I saw him pull his phone out of his pocket, his thumbs fumbling over the screen. My mother stepped out of the bathroom to look at him. When she returned to the doorway a second later, she sneered down at me. Finally, we are going to prove to everyone that asthma is just a pathetic anxiety disorder. This is the ultimate test. Take a deep breath. I kept my face buried in the bath mat, suffocating. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even shake my head. She lost her temper completely. She kicked my leg, shoving me fully into the bathroom, stepped back, and slammed the heavy wooden door shut. I heard the lock click from the outside. I was trapped. The machine sat 2 feet away from my head, blasting concentrated ozone directly into my face. My chest completely seized up. Black spots danced at the edge of my vision. I scraped my fingernails against the tile, trying to pull myself toward the crack under the door, but I didn't have the strength. Outside the door, Sam had seen enough. Mom, unlock that right now. I heard a scuffle. Then, a heavy thud. Sam had grabbed the solid bronze bookend from the hallway console table. He swung it with everything he had. The metal smashed into the doorknob, shattering the internal locking mechanism with a loud crack. Sam kicked the door open. He didn't even look at me. He lunged for the heavy generator generator, ripped the cord out of the wall, and hurled the metal box out of the bathroom and into the carpeted hallway. My mother shrieked. "What is wrong with you? That machine cost $650. She rushed over to the hallway floor to inspect the dented casing, utterly ignoring the fact that I was choking on the floor behind her. She ran her hands over the metal grate, furious. "If this is broken, you're paying for it." She picked it up. She looked at Sam, then looked past him to me, her face twisted with pure contempt. "Look, it's perfectly safe, you dramatic babies," she said. To prove her point, she lifted the heavy machine, put her face right up to the output vent, and took a massive, exaggerated inhale of whatever residual gas was still sitting in the chamber. We watched her. For a second, she looked triumphant. Then, Sam and I instantly saw her expression freeze. Her eyes widened. The smugness vanished, replaced by total, unadulterated terror. She opened her mouth to speak. "See? Just a fake," but her voice vanished into a horrific, high-pitched wheeze. All at once, my mother's knees buckled. She slammed onto the hardwood floor, dropping the machine. It clattered against the baseboards. She clutched her throat with both hands, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her neck. We watched her, genuinely thinking it was a sick joke, a final cruel performance to mock me. But then her lips turned a deep bruise purple. She started clawing frantically at the collar of her blouse, ripping the buttons. Her chest was heaving violently, but no air was going in. The sound coming out of her was mechanical, a broken whistling noise. Sam looked at me in horror. The phone was still in his hand. He put it to his ear and ran into the kitchen to scream at the 911 dispatcher. I crawled out of the bathroom, my own lungs burning, and slumped against the wall. I couldn't help her. I couldn't even help myself. I watched my mother's eyes roll back in her head. She was having a massive, lethal bronchospasm right there on the hallway runner. The paramedics arrived less than 6 minutes later, just in time to witness her body go completely limp. They burst through the front door, sweeping past Sam. They threw a mask over her face, pumped her full of epinephrine, and loaded her onto a stretcher. The whole house felt like a crime scene. One of the EMTs tossed my red inhaler into my lap before they wheeled her out. I took 3 deep puffs, the medication hitting my lungs like ice water. When they took her to the ER, Sam and I followed in a neighbor's car. We sat in the sterile fluorescent waiting room for 3 hours before a doctor finally came out. Turns out she had severe undiagnosed reactive airway disease. The massive hit of ozone had sent her bronchial tubes into an immediate catastrophic lockdown. She was going to live, but she was going to be on a ventilator for at least 2 days. I just stared at the doctor, the irony sitting like a lead weight in my stomach. She better hope they don't clean her hospital room with bleach. A hospital social worker named Ren came to talk to us. She asked pointed questions. Why was the ozone generator running? Why was there bleach in the air? We lied. Habit took over. We told Ren it was a cleaning accident. My mom was mixing chemicals. A stupid mistake. Ren didn't look convinced, but my aunt was on her way to pick us up, and we weren't covered in bruises, so she let it go. By the time my aunt dropped me off at school, it was nearly noon. I was exhausted. My throat felt like it had been scrubbed with sandpaper. My chest was still incredibly sore. Every breath a dull ache. But I needed to be out of that hospital. I needed normal. I walked into 3rd period late. Mr. Holt's biology class. He paused his lecture on cell division and glared at me over his glasses as I handed him my late slip. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just pointed to my empty desk in the back row. 20 minutes into the class, the lingering effects of the morning caught up with me. The school's vac system kicked on, blowing dry, dusty air directly over my desk. My chest tightened. That familiar, terrifying clamp returning. I didn't want to make a scene. I reached into my sweatshirt pocket, pulled out the red inhaler, ducked my head down toward my desk, and took a quick puff. "Excuse me," Mr. Holt's voice cut through the quiet classroom. I froze, holding the breath in my lungs. I looked up. Every kid in the room had turned to look at me. Holt marched down the aisle, his hand outstretched. "What did you just inhale?" "My asthma medication," I rasped, exhaling slowly. "Do you have a medical dispensation form on file with the nurse's office for self-administration of a controlled substance?" he asked, his voice loud, formal. I don't know, he said. "I just needed it. I had an attack this morning." Hand it over. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "I need it." He didn't ask again. He reached down and snatched the red plastic inhaler off my desk. "Zero tolerance policy. You know, no unverified drugs on campus." My desk. Now, I stared at him, disbelief warring with a lingering panic in my chest. I had just watched my mother nearly die because she took this from me, and now he was doing it. "Give it back," I said, standing up. "Sit down," he ordered. I said, "Give it back." I lunged for it. My hand caught his wrist, just like my mother had caught mine hours earlier. Mr. Holt stumbled back, his eyes wide. "Assault. You are assaulting a teacher." He hit the call button on the wall intercom. 2 minutes later, I was sitting in Principal Sorrell's office. The inhaler sat on her heavy mahogany desk, completely out of reach. Sorrell sat across from me, her hands folded, looking at me like I was a delinquent caught smoking meth in the bathroom. "Zero tolerance is zero tolerance," Sorrell said calmly. "And Miss Holt reports that you became physically violent when he confiscated the contraband." "It's albuterol," I yelled, my voice cracking. I couldn't breathe. "You'll have to explain that to the authorities," she said, her tone flat. Through the frosted glass of her office door, I saw 2 dark blue uniforms walking down the hallway, the heavy clanking of utility belts. The door handle turned. 2 officers stepped into the room. The first was a tall, heavy-set man whose silver name tag read Declan. The second was a younger woman, Petra. The radio on Declan's shoulder crackled with static, ridiculously loud in the quiet office. Principal Sorrell stood up. She smoothed the front of her blazer. "Officers, thank you for coming so quickly." Declan looked at me. I was sitting in the vinyl guest chair, my eyes red, my breathing still carrying a faint, ragged edge. I must have looked like a wreck. I felt like one. "This the student?" Declan asked. "Yes," Sorrell said. She pointed a manicured finger at my red inhaler sitting on her desk. She was caught self-administering an unapproved substance in the classroom. When the teacher confiscated it according to district policy, she became physically violent. She grabbed his wrist and attempted to wrestle it away. Petra frowned. She walked over to the desk and looked down at the red plastic L shape. "It's an albuterol inhaler, an emergency rescue inhaler. It is undocumented," Sorrell said, entirely missing the tone of the officer's voice. "We have no dispensation form. For all we know, it contains a completely different chemical or illegal substance. Given the assault, we are treating it as a level 4 disciplinary infraction." I just stared at Sorrell. The sheer blinding stupidity of it was suffocating. It felt worse than the ozone. "It's prescription acid medicine," I said. My my voice barely a whisper. My mom was just admitted to the ICU this morning for a severe respiratory attack. I had to resume. I couldn't breathe in class. He took it from me. Petra looked from me to Sorrel. Declan sighed, shifting his weight. He didn't reach for his handcuffs, which was a relief, but he pulled a small notepad from his chest pocket. Okay, kid, what's your name? He asked. I told him. And your parents? My mom is at St. Jude's. ICU. Like I said. Father? Not in the picture. Who's your emergency contact then? My aunt. Cora Calloway. Call the aunt. Verify the ICU story. If the mom's really in the hospital, we need a guardian here anyway. Petra stepped out into the hallway to make the call. Sorrel sat back down, looking deeply unsatisfied that I wasn't already in zip ties. Assaulting a teacher is still a crime, officer. Even if the contraband turns out to be medicinal. She grabbed his wrist, ma'am. Let's not escalate this to a felony just yet, Declan said tiredly. He leaned against the filing cabinet. You got any marks on you, kid? No, I said. Just my chest hurts. A lot. 10 minutes later, Aunt Cora burst through the office doors. She looked frantic. She was still wearing her scrubs from her shift at the dental clinic, her hair escaping from a messy clip. What on earth is going on? Cora demanded, zeroing in on me. I just dropped you off 2 hours ago. The police called me. They said you assaulted someone. I grabbed Mr. Holt's arm because he took my inhaler mid-attack, I said. Cora stopped dead. She looked at the red inhaler on Sorrel's desk. Then she looked at Sorrel. The panic in her eyes instantly hardened into something entirely different. Cora was my mom's sister, but where my mom was vain and cruel, Cora was fiercely practical and had zero patience for bureaucracy. You took a child's rescue inhaler? Cora asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Mr. Holt confiscated it, Sorrel corrected. It's a zero tolerance. Are you out of your mind? Cora snapped, taking a step toward the desk. Officer Declan instinctively put a hand up, but Cora ignored him. Her mother is currently on a ventilator because of a severe respiratory event this morning. This kid was exposed to the exact same trigger, and your teacher ripped her life-saving medication out of her hands? She doesn't have the paperwork on file, Sorrel insisted, though her voice wavered slightly under Cora's glare. Then send her to the nurse to use it, Cora yelled. You don't take it away from her. What if she stopped breathing? Were you going to give her detention while she turned blue? Cora reached down, snatched the inhaler off the desk, and shoved it into my hand. Sorrel gasped. Ma'am, you can't, Sorrel started. I'm taking her home, Cora said to Officer Declan, completely ignoring the principal. If you want to charge a teenager with assault for trying to breathe, you can send the paperwork to my house. But we are leaving. Declan looked at Petra, who had just walked back in. Petra gave a subtle nod. The hospital confirmed the mother's admission. Severe bronchial spasms. Toxic exposure. Declan closed his notepad. You're free to go, ma'am. Principal Sorrel, if the school wants to press formal charges for the wrist grab, you can file a report at the precinct. But I'm not arresting a kid over an asthma pump. We walked out of the school. The bright afternoon sun felt harsh against my eyes. I climbed into the passenger seat of Cora's Honda, pulling the seatbelt across my aching chest. I just wanted to go to her house, curl up in the guest bed, and sleep for a week. But Cora didn't start the car. She sat there, her hands gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Her knuckles were white. Aunt Cora? I asked tentatively. Are we going home? She took a deep breath. When she looked over at me, the righteous anger from the principal's office was gone. In its place was a tight, nervous fear. We can't go to my house yet, she said. Why? Because Wren called me. The social worker from the hospital. A cold dread pooled in my stomach. What did she say? Cora rubbed her temples. She said the doctors ran a tox screen and analyzed the blood gas levels on your mother. It wasn't a cleaning accident. There was no bleach in her system, and the tissue damage in her lungs is consistent with high-level ozone exposure. Wren knows you and Sam lied. I looked down at the red inhaler in my lap. I didn't say anything. She interviewed Sam while I was driving here, Cora continued, voice trembling slightly. Sam cracked. He told her everything. The bleach, the machine, locking you in the bathroom, all of it. Wren put a temporary hold on you and Sam. Child Protective Services is involved now. They're at my house right now, assessing if it's a safe placement environment for you two while the investigation is open. Cora turned fully to face me. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you cover for her? Because it's what we always do, I whispered. Well, you can't do it anymore, Cora said. She moved hard to here. There's a detective waiting at my house too. They want a formal statement from you about what happened this morning, and if you lied to them to protect her, they're going to place you in foster care instead of with me. I stared out the window as we pulled away from the curb. My chest felt tighter than ever, but this time, the inhaler wasn't going to fix it. The drive to Cora's house took 20 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. We didn't speak. The radio was off. All I could hear was the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the ragged, uneven sound of my own breathing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother dropping to the hardwood floor, her lips turning that horrible bruise purple. I hated her for what she did to me, but the guilt of watching her choke was a heavy, nauseating knot in my stomach. Cora turned onto her street. It was a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. Usually, coming here felt like a vacation. Today, it felt like pulling into a holding cell. 2 cars were parked in front of her house. One was a plain white Ford Fusion County, almost certainly. The other was a dark gray unmarked sedan. Cora put the Honda in park. She turned off the engine and looked at me. Listen to me. You tell them exactly what happened. Don't leave out the bleach. Don't leave out the lock. If you try to protect her, they will take you and Sam away from me. Do you understand? I nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. We walked up the driveway. Cora unlocked the front door and pushed it open. The house smelled like cinnamon and old paper, just like it always did, but the atmosphere was completely entirely different. Sam was sitting on the edge of the floral sofa in the living room. He had his knees pulled up to his chest, his eyes red and swollen. Across from him, sitting in Cora's armchair, was a woman with sharp features and a thick manila folder resting on her lap. Standing near the fireplace was a man in a rumpled brown suit. Cora, the woman said, standing up. I'm Paige. We spoke on the phone. This is Detective Bastian. Bastian didn't smile. He just nodded at us. He looked tired. He had a notebook out, clicking a cheap plastic pen with his thumb. Let's just get this over with, Cora said, dropping her keys on the console table. She walked over to Sam and sat next to him, putting a protective arm around his shoulders. He leaned into her instantly. Paige turned her attention to me. I know this has been an incredibly traumatic day. I'm with Child Protective Services. Detective Bastian is from the local precinct. We need to ask you some questions about what happened this morning. Sam has already told us his version of events, but we need to hear it from you. I stood in the entryway. I wanted to sit down, but my legs felt locked in place. I looked at Sam. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at a loose thread on the silver cord, picking at it frantically. He felt like he had betrayed the family. My mother had drilled it into our heads since we were little. What happens in this house stays in this house. You never air dirty laundry. You never make her look bad. Take a seat, Bastian said. It wasn't a request. I walked over and sat in the wooden dining chair opposite the sofa. Your brother says your mother intentionally sprayed a commercial bleaching agent into a confined space while you were inside. Bastian started consulting his notes. He also states she subsequently introduced an industrial ozone generator, turned it on, and locked the door from the outside, trapping you inside during an active asthma attack. Is that accurate? Hearing it spoken out loud by a stranger in a cheap suit made it sound completely insane. For years, I had normalized her behavior. She had a temper. She was stressed. She was dramatic. But hearing the clinical breakdown of what she actually did stripped away all the excuses. It was abuse. It was attempted murder. I swallowed hard. The silence in the room was suffocating. I could feel Cora staring at me. I could feel the weight of Sam's terrified guilt. Yes, I said. My voice cracked. That's exactly what happened. Bastian stopped licking his pen. He looked at me for a long moment. Why did she do it? Because I forgot my inhaler, I said. The absurdity of it burning in my chest. We were running late. I went back inside for it. She got mad. She said I was faking my asthma. She wanted to prove it was just anxiety. By gassing you? Bastian asked, his eyebrows raising slightly. Yes. Paige leaned forward, her pen moving quickly across her notepad. Has she ever done anything like this before? Withheld medication? Locked you in rooms? She hides my medicine sometimes, I admitted, looking down at my hands. If she thinks I'm using it too much, or if she's mad at me. She says I use it as a crutch. She locked me in the basement last year for breaking glass. Sam mumbled into Cora's shoulder. Left me down there for 6 hours with the lights off. I closed my eyes. I hadn't known about that. Bastian wrote that down. Alright, I'm going to head over to the house. I need to take photos of the bathroom, the lock mechanism, and the machine. Do we have a key? Cora reached into the room and tossed him a spare set of keys. He caught them easily. Thanks, Bastian said. He looked at Paige. You got what you need here? For now, Paige said. She closed her folder. Given the statements from both minors and the medical evidence from the hospital, I am placing an emergency 72-hour protective hold on both children. Cora, I'm designating you as the temporary kinship placement. They cannot return to that house, and they cannot have unsupervised contact with their mother under any circumstances. She's in an induced coma on a ventilator, Cora said flatly. I don't think she's going to be making any unsupervised visits. Regardless, Paige said, ignoring the sarcasm. The paperwork will be filed first thing in the morning. A judge will need to sign off on a longer-term placement next week, pending the police investigation. Bastian walked to the front door. He paused with his hand on the knob. Kid, you did the right thing telling the truth. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you did. He walked out, followed shortly by Paige. The heavy front door clicked shut behind them. The house was silent again. The sudden absence of the authorities left a ringing in my ears. I just sat in the wooden chair, staring at the floorboards. We had done it. We had finally blown up our own lives. There was no going back to the house on Elm Street. There was no going back to pretending my mother was just strict. We were in the system now. Cora let out a long, shaky breath. She stood up and walked into the kitchen. I heard the faucet run, and a moment later, she came back with 2 glasses of water. She handed one to Sam and put the other on the table in front of me. Drink, she said. I took a sip. The water was freezing cold, and it hurt my raw throat going down. I'm sorry, Sam whispered. I looked at him. He was trembling. I thought she was going to kill you, he said, tears finally spilling over his eyelashes. When she locked the door, I panicked. And then, when the lady at the hospital started asking questions, I couldn't lie anymore. I'm sorry. Don't you ever apologize for that, Cora said fiercely, kneeling down in front of him. You saved her life today, Sam. You broke that door. You threw that machine out. You called 911. You are the only reason either of them is alive right now. I got up and moved to the sofa. I wrapped my arms around my little brother. He buried his face in my chest and sobbed. I held him tightly, my own tears finally falling, hot and fast. We sat like that for a long time. The 3 of us huddled in Cora's living room, trying to process the wreckage of the day. Around 6 o'clock, Cora ordered a pizza. None of us were particularly hungry, but the routine of opening the cardboard box and taking slices helped anchor us back to reality. I managed to eat half a slice before my stomach rebelled. I went into the guest bathroom to wash my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked awful. Pale dark circles under my eyes, my hair a tangled mess. I turned on the tap and splashed cold water on my cheeks. I reached for a towel on the rack, but as I dried my face, my eyes landed on a bottle of bleach-based cleaner sitting under the sink. My chest immediately tightened. A phantom smell of chlorine hit my nose. My lungs constricted, a pure Pavlovian panic response. I stumbled backward, hitting the shower door. I grabbed the edge of the sink, gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs. Hey, Cora's voice came from the doorway. She moved quickly, grabbing the bottle from under the sink and taking it out of the room. I'm sorry. I'm throwing it away right now. Breathe. Just look at me and breathe. She guided me to sit on the edge of the bathtub. She stayed with me for 20 minutes until my heart rate slowed down and I could draw a full breath without wheezing. It's going to take time, Cora said softly, sitting on the bath mat next to my feet. You're going to be hypervigilant for a while. That's normal. I just want to sleep, I whispered. Go to the guest room. I put fresh sheets on the bed. Sam is taking the couch. Try to get some rest. I nodded and walked down the hall to the guest room. I didn't even take off my clothes. I just crawled under the heavy quilt and curled into a ball. Exhaustion pulled me under almost instantly. It was a dark, dreamless sleep, heavy and absolute. I woke up abruptly. The room was pitch black. I didn't know what time it was, but the house was dead silent. I lay there for a second, disoriented, my heart beating a little too fast. Then I heard it. Voices. Coming from the kitchen. I sat up slowly. The clock on the nightstand read 3:14 a.m. I crept out of bed and opened the bedroom door as quietly as I could. The hallway was dark, but a sliver of yellow light spilled out from under the kitchen door. I walked softly down the hall, holding my breath. It was Cora. She was on the phone. Her voice was low, harsh, and dripping with venom. "I don't give a damn what the machines say," Cora hissed into the receiver. "You are not talking to them." I froze. I pressed my back against the wall just outside the kitchen doorway. "No, Sylvie," Cora said. "You don't get to demand anything. You lost that right when you locked your daughter in a room with toxic gas." My stomach plummeted. Sylvie, my mother, she was awake. There was a pause as Cora listened. I could hear a faint, raspy, metallic voice coming from the phone speaker. It didn't sound human. It sounded like someone speaking through a crushed tin can. "You're pathetic," Cora spat back. "You really are. You're lying in a hospital bed, your throat torn to shreds, and your first instinct is to threaten me? Go ahead, call your lawyer. See what a family court judge thinks about the police photos of the shattered lock and the ozone generator." Another long pause. The metallic scratching sound from the phone got louder. "They took statements from both of them," Cora said, her voice dropping into an icy register I had never heard her use for. "There's no walking this back, Sylvie. CPS already placed them with me. You try to come near this house when they discharge you, and I swear to God I will let Detective Bastian arrest you in my driveway." Cora hung up the phone. I heard the sharp clatter of the device hitting the granite countertop. Then, a heavy, exhausted sigh. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My mother was awake. She was off the ventilator, and she was already coming for us. I stepped out from behind the wall. Cora jumped startled, her hand flying through her chest. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Long enough," I said, my voice hoarse. "She's awake?" Cora rubbed her face, suddenly looking incredibly old. She pulled out a bar stool and sat down. "The hospital called 20 minutes ago. They extubated her around midnight. She stabilized much faster than they expected. Her throat is severely burned, but she can whisper. She's trying to get us back. It wasn't a question. She thinks she can intimidate her way out of this," Cora said bitterly. "She thinks because she has money, she can hire a lawyer to spin this as an accident. She told me she's going to claim you broke the door yourself during a panic attack, and that she was just trying to sanitize the bathroom to help your allergies." "That's insane," I said, a cold sweat breaking out on the back of my neck. "Sam and I already told the police the truth." "I know," Cora said, "but she's your mother. She knows how to manipulate the system. She's banking on the fact that you're minors, and that your stories can be discredited in court. She told me to pack your bags because her lawyer is filing an emergency injunction to revoke my kinship placement the second the courthouse opens." "Can they do that?" "I don't know," Cora admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't have the kind of money she does to fight a protracted legal battle. And Paige warned me that family courts heavily favor reunification, even in severe cases, if the parent shows remorse and agrees to counseling." I felt the floor drop out from under me. Reunification. The word felt like a death sentence. The thought of walking back into that house, of standing in that hallway, of being under her control again after everything we had just done, it was suffocating. Worse than the bleach, worse than the ozone. "I won't go back," I said, my voice shaking but absolute. "I'll run away. I'll take Sam and we'll leave." "Don't talk like that," Cora said sharply. "If you run, you prove her point. You make her look like the victim of unstable teenagers. We fight this by the book. The book doesn't work against her. You know it doesn't," I practically shouted, not caring if I woke Sam. "She lies to everyone. She'll cry in front of the judge. She'll wear a scarf to hide the marks on her neck, and she'll blame me. She always blames me." "Not this time," a voice said from the doorway. Cora and I both spun around. Sam was standing there. He was holding his phone in his hand, the screen glowing brightly in the dim kitchen. "What do you mean, Sam?" Cora asked gently. Sam walked into the kitchen and set his phone face up on the island counter. "When she locked you in the bathroom," Sam said, looking directly at me, his voice eerily calm for a 13-year-old who had spent the last 10 hours crying. "Before I grabbed the bookend to break the door, I had my phone out. I told her I was calling 911. I remember," I said. "I didn't call 911 right away," Sam said. He looked down at the glowing screen. "I hit record first." He pressed play. The sound of the kitchen vanished, replaced by the chaotic, muffled audio of the hallway from that morning. The audio was mostly pocket voice at first, but then it came through with terrifying clarity. "Mom, stop it! I'm calling 911. That was Sam's voice, higher panic. Then, the unmistakable sound of the heavy wooden bathroom door slamming shut, followed by the sharp, metallic lick of the deadbolt. Then my mother's voice, crystal clear, no panic, just cold, cruel amusement. "Finally, we are going to prove to everyone that asthma is just a pathetic anxiety disorder. This is the ultimate test. Take a deep breath." The recording captured the muffled sound of my coughing through the wood. It captured Sam screaming at her to unlock the door, and it captured her walking away, humming under her breath, right before Sam smashed the lock. The recording stopped. The kitchen was dead silent. Cora stared at the phone as if it were a live grenade. She reached out slowly and touched the screen. "Sam," Cora whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "Did you show this to the police? Did you show this to Detective Bastian?" "No," Sam said quietly. "I was too scared. I don't know what I thought. I was scared she would go to jail forever." "She might," Cora said. She looked at me, a fierce, terrifying hope igniting in her eyes. "She just might." Cora grabbed her own phone off the counter. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm waking up Detective Bastian," Cora said, dialing the number from the card he had left on the console table. "Sylvie wants a war in court tomorrow morning. We're bringing a nuke." We didn't go back to sleep. The three of us sat around the kitchen island as the sun slowly began to rise, turning the sky outside the window a bruised, pale purple. It looked exactly like the color of my mother's lips when she collapsed. At 6:01 a.m., there was a knock at the door. Cora let Detective Bastian in. He was wearing the exact same suit from yesterday, looking like he hadn't slept either. He held a large thermal mug of coffee and a secure digital evidence bag. We sat in the living room. Sam played the audio file for him. Bastian didn't react while it played. He just stared at the coffee table, his jaw muscles working. When the recording ended, he let out a long, slow breath through his nose. "You took this video on your phone, son?" Bastian asked, looking at Sam. "It's just audio," Sam corrected. My phone was in my pocket. "Okay, I need to take the phone to establish chain of custody and extract a raw file," Bastian said, pulling out an evidence receipt pad. "Are you willing to surrender the device?" Sam nodded and handed it over without hesitation. Bastian dropped it into the plastic bag and sealed it. "I'll be honest with you, Bastian said, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Without this, it was a he said, she said with minors. Even with the physical evidence of the lock and the machine, the defense attorney didn't introduce reasonable doubt. Claimed the lock was sticky, claimed she didn't know the machine was dangerous. Cranky kids were exaggerating. I've seen it 100 times. He tapped the sealed plastic bag. But this shows intent. Premeditation. She locked the door on purpose and taunted the victim while doing it. This escalates it from reckless endangerment and child abuse to attempted manslaughter. The word hung in the air. Manslaughter. The sheer gravity of it finally crushed whatever lingering loyalty I had left. What happens now? Cora asked. I'm taking this directly to the district attorney's office when they open at 8, Bastien said, standing up. I'm going to get an expedited warrant for her arrest. She's still in the ICU, Cora reminded him. Then I'll arrest her in the ICU, Bastien said coldly. We'll post an officer at her door. She won't be allowed to make any outbound calls, and she certainly won't be contacting her lawyer to file any custody injunctions against you. When the hospital clears her for discharge, she's going straight to county lockup. He looked at me. You kids stay here. Keep the doors locked. Don't answer the phone unless it's me or Paige from CPS. He left. The morning dragged on. Every passing car on the street made my chest tighten. Every time the refrigerator kicked on, I flinched. I was exhausted, but I was wired with a jagged, nervous energy. I felt like I was waiting for a bomb to go off. At 10:30 a.m., Cora's phone rang. It wasn't Bastien. It wasn't Paige. It was an unknown number. Cora stared at the screen. She looked at me, then at Sam. We were sitting on the couch watching a muted cartoon on the television. Don't answer it, I said. Cora hesitated, but the phone kept ringing. She picked it up and hit accept, putting it on speakerphone. Hello, Cora Calloway? A smooth, professional male voice asked. Speaking. My name is Arthur Wyndham. I am the legal counsel retained by Sylvie Drent. Cora stiffened. She leaned over the coffee table, her eyes narrowing. I have nothing to say to you. Any communication regarding the children needs to go through CPS. This isn't about custody, Ms. Calloway, Wyndham said. His voice was perfectly calibrated, betraying zero emotion. I am calling to inform you that my client is currently in police custody at St. Jude's Hospital. I know, Cora said, a grim satisfaction bleeding into her voice. I hope you enjoy defending attempted manslaughter. Actually, Wyndham said smoothly, that is exactly why I'm calling. Sylvie has authorized me to make an offer. An arrangement, if you will, to avoid the public spectacle of a criminal trial. There is no arrangement, Cora snapped. She gassed her daughter. She's going to prison. Prison is highly unlikely, Ms. Calloway. Sylvie has no prior record, significant standing in the community, and she recently suffered a massive, near-fatal medical trauma. A sympathetic jury might view this as a tragic misunderstanding, exacerbated by an underlying mental health crisis. You haven't heard the tape, have you? Cora asked, almost laughing. There was a fractional pause on the other end of the line, just a microsecond of silence, but it was enough to tell me Wyndham knew exactly what she was talking about. The audio recording obtained by the minor is currently under review for admissibility, Wyndham said, recovering quickly. But setting that aside, Sylvie is prepared to make a very generous concession to ensure the emotional well-being of the children, of course. What concession? Cora asked, her tone dripping with suspicion. If you and the children agree to recant the allegations of intent, if you state to the DA that the door locking was an accident and the audio recording was taken out of context during an argument, Sylvie will voluntarily sign over full permanent legal guardianship of both children to you. Immediately. No family court battle. No drawn-out custody hearings. I stopped breathing. The room went perfectly still. Furthermore, Wyndham continued, his voice slick and persuasive. She will establish an irrevocable trust fund for both minors, to be administered by you, covering all living expenses, medical fees, and future college tuitions. The sum is substantial. It would guarantee their financial security indefinitely. Cora looked at me. Her face was unreadable. She's trying to buy her way out of a felony charge, Cora said slowly. She is attempting to preserve what's left of the family's privacy and ensure the children are provided for, Wyndham corrected. A criminal trial will be a media circus. Your niece and nephew will be put on the stand. They will be cross-examined. Their trauma will be public record. This offer gives them security, safety, and a clean break. The paperwork is already drafted. I just need your verbal agreement to proceed. Cora didn't speak. She looked at the peeling paint on the windowsill. Then she looked at Sam, who was watching her with terrified wide eyes. Then she looked at me. Tell him no, I whispered. Cora closed her eyes. We need time to think about it, Cora said into the phone. My heart stopped. Excellent, Wyndham said. I'll call back at 3 o'clock. Have a good afternoon, Miss Calloway. The line went dead. I stood up from the couch. I felt like I had been hit by a truck. What did you just do? Cora put the phone down. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I just bought us a few hours. You're thinking about taking it, I said, my voice rising in panic. You're actually thinking about letting her get away with it. I'm thinking about your future, Cora yelled, finally looking at me. Do you have any idea how much a trial costs? Do you know what cross-examination will do to Sam? They will tear him apart on the stand. They will try to make him look like a liar. And if they somehow beat the charges, if she gets off on a technicality or a sympathetic jury, she keeps custody. She gets you both back, and she will never ever let you leave. She tried to kill me, I screamed. My chest heaved, a sharp familiar pain lancing through my ribs. I grabbed my chest, coughing. Cora was by my side in an instant. Stop yelling. You can't stress your lungs like this. I pushed her away. I didn't care about my lungs. I cared that the one adult who was supposed to protect us was considering a payoff from our abuser. If you take the deal, I gasped, trying to catch my breath. She wins. She always wins. If I take the deal, you get permanent guardianship, Cora pleaded, her voice breaking. You never have to see her again. You get your college paid for. You get a life. If we roll the dice in court, we could lose everything. She wasn't entirely wrong, and that's what made it so horrifying. The justice system wasn't a fairy tale. It was a meat grinder, and my mother had the money to oil the gears. But the idea of her sitting in her mansion, writing a check to buy her freedom while I lived the rest of my life, knowing she got away with it, it made me physically sick. I turned away from Cora and walked into the kitchen. I needed space. I needed to think. I leaned against the counter, staring blindly out the window at the neighbor's overgrown lawn. A few minutes later, I heard the soft padding of footsteps behind me. It was Sam. He walked up to the counter and stood next to me. He didn't look at me. He just stared out the window too. I don't want her money, Sam said quietly. I looked at him. I don't either. But Aunt Cora is scared, Sam continued. She's a dental hygienist. She doesn't have money for lawyers. Mom will destroy her. We have the tape, Sam. The police said it was enough. Wyndham said it might not be, Sam replied, parroting the lawyer's smooth words. He looked up at me, his face pale. What if she gets away with it? What if she comes back? I didn't have an answer for him. The truth was, I was just as terrified as Cora. The thought of sitting in a sterile courtroom, looking at my mother across across the aisle while some highly paid attorney called me dramatic, called me a liar, asked why I hadn't signed my medical dispensation forms at school. It was paralyzing. They would use everything against me, even the incident with Mr. Holt. They would paint me as violent, unstable, and vindictive. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the red plastic inhaler. I turned it over in my hand. The white plastic mouthpiece was slightly stuck from when Mr. Holt had yanked it across the desk. It was just a piece of plastic and compressed medicine, but it was the center of gravity for my entire life. The back door of the kitchen opened. Cora stepped onto the small patio, pulling a pack of cigarettes out of her pocket. I hadn't seen her smoke in 5 years. She lit one with shaky hands, took a long drag, and blew the smoke up toward the gutters. I walked to the back door and pushed it open. The smell of the smoke made me instinctively step back, but I held my ground in the doorway. Cora looked at me, looking incredibly guilty. She held the cigarette down by her side. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be smoking around you. It's fine. I'm inside, I said. Are you going to take a deal? Cora took another drag, staring out at the small, fenced-in yard. I don't know. If you say yes, I said slowly, they'll make us sign NDAs. They'll make us promise never to talk about what happened. We'll be legally bound to protect her reputation forever. I know how these things work, Cora said tiredly. Is that what you want? For me and Sam to spend the rest of our lives covering up for her? Cora turned to face me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. I want you to be safe. That's all I want. I don't care about justice. I care about survival. You think the truth always wins. It doesn't. Money wins. Power wins. And your mother has both. If I have to swallow my pride and take a payout to keep you two out of her clutches permanently, I will do it. She threw the half-smoked cigarette onto the concrete patio and crushed it under her heel. She walked past me, back into the house. I stood in the doorway for a long time. The smell of the smoke lingered in the air, mixing with the distant scent of freshly cut grass. At 2:45 p.m., Cora came back into the kitchen. She had washed her face and changed out of her wrinkled clothes. She looked determined, resigned. She picked up her phone from the counter and checked the time. 15 minutes until Wyndham called back. I'm doing it, Cora announced to the empty kitchen. Sam and I were sitting at the small dining table. I'm taking the permanent guardianship. I'm taking the trust. I'll sign whatever they want. Sam looked down at his hands. He looked relieved, honestly. He just wanted it to be over. I felt a cold, hard knot forming my chest. It wasn't asthma this time. It was pure distilled anger. You're making a mistake, I said. I'm making a choice, Cora corrected softly. And it's mine to make. At exactly 3 p.m., the phone rang. Cora took a deep breath. She reached out and answered it, putting it on speaker again. Calloway. Wyndham's smooth voice drifted through the kitchen. I trust you've had time to consider my client's proposal. I have, Cora said, her voice steady. We'll take the deal. Send the paperwork over. Excellent decision, Wyndham said, sounding entirely unsurprised. I will have the guardianship transfer documents and the non-disclosure agreements couriered to your house within the hour. Once signed, the district attorney will be notified that the minors declined to participate in any prosecution, and the charges will be dropped. Just send the papers, Cora said, reaching to hang up. Before you do, Wyndham interrupted, a new, sharper edge to his voice. There is one additional stipulation my client has requested. A minor detail, really. Cora froze. What stipulation? Sylvie insists on a formal written retraction regarding the hospital admission, Wyndham said. The narrative needs to be corrected for insurance and public relations purposes. You and the children must sign a sworn affidavit stating that the ozone generator malfunctioned independently and that Sylvie's exposure was an unfortunate byproduct of her attempting to rescue you from the fumes. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. You want me to sign a paper saying she tried to save me? I asked, my voice rising. I stood up from the table. She locked the door. She laughed. It's a necessary legal fiction to protect her standing with her corporate board, Wyndham said coolly. A minor concession for the millions of dollars and complete freedom you are receiving in return. Cora's hand was shaking as she hovered over the phone. She wants to be the hero, Cora whispered, the realization dawning on her face. She's not just buying her way out of jail. She's buying a hero narrative. She wants to tell everyone she nearly died saving her kids. It's standard reputation management, Wyndham said. Do we have an agreement? I looked at Cora. I didn't say a word. I just waited. Cora stared at the phone. Her jaw tightened. The resignation that had been etched into her face all afternoon suddenly fractured, replaced by a deep, visceral disgust. She picked the phone up off the counter. She didn't put it to her ear. She held it in front of her face like she was holding a snake. Mr. Wyndham, Cora said, her voice dangerously quiet. Yes, Ms. Calloway? Tell my sister she can take her hero narrative, her trust fund, and her non-disclosure agreement, and she can choke on them. Cora hung up the phone. She looked at me. Her hands were still shaking, but her eyes were clear. Get your coats, Cora said. We're going to the police precinct. We're going to sit down with Bastian, and we are going to press every single charge they have. I grabbed my jacket off the hook by the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the zipper up. The metal teeth kept misaligning, snagging on the cheap fabric until I just gave up and left it open. Sam didn't say a word. He just walked to the entryway, slid his sneakers on, and stood by the door, staring at the doorknob. He looked smaller than he had yesterday. The drive to the precinct was entirely different from the drive to Cora's house. There was no suffocating silence, no heavy, dreadful anticipation. There was just a cold, sharp momentum. Cora drove exactly the speed limit, her hands at 10 and 2, her jaw set so tight I thought her teeth might crack. The police station was a squat, concrete building downtown. Walking inside felt like stepping into a sterile fluorescent purgatory. It smelled like damp wool, cheap floor wax, and stale coffee. We checked in at the bulletproof glass window, and 10 minutes later, Detective Bastian came through a set of heavy double doors. He looked surprised to see us back so soon. Everything okay? He asked, his eyes darting between the three of us. No, Cora said flatly. We need to talk now, and we need to sign whatever we have to sign to make sure the district attorney doesn't drop a single charge. Bastian's eyebrows went up. He led us down a narrow hallway lined with scuffed gray desks to a small interview room at the back. It had a metal table, 3 plastic chairs, and a camera mounted high in the corner. Sit, he said, pulling up a chair from an adjacent desk. He dropped a legal pad onto the metal table. What happened? Cora told him. She gave him the exact time of Wyndham's call, repeated the settlement offer word for word, and detailed the demand for the sworn affidavit retracting the hospital admission story. Bastian didn't interrupt. He just wrote quickly, his pen scratching loudly in the quiet room. When Cora finished, he let out a low whistle, tossing the the pen onto the pad. Wyndham, Bastian muttered, shaking his head. Arthur Wyndham. Of course she hired him. Guy is a shark. He wears a $3,000 suit and doesn't care who bleeds on it. Is it witness tampering? Cora asked. Can you arrest him for that? Bastian rubbed the back of his neck. No, it's borderline, but it's legally dressed up as a civil settlement offer. Reputation management tied to a guardianship transfer. It's dirty as hell, but it's how these guys operate. They try to buy the victims out before the DA even has time to read the file. But the fact that she tried it, Bastian looked at me, then at Sam. It means she knows the audio recording is a kill shot. She's terrified. Good, I said. My voice sounded hollow, even to me. I want her to be. Bastian pulled a stack of forms from the folder he had carried in. If we do this, there's no backing out. The DA will use these sworn statements to file the formal indictment. Once that happens, the state takes over. Even if you change your minds later, the state can compel you to testify. You understand that? This goes all the way. We understand, Cora said. Bastian slid the first paper toward me. Read it carefully. Sign at the bottom. It was a sarcastic summary of my mother locking me in a room with toxic gas. Reading it on official police letterhead made my stomach churn. It made it undeniable. I picked up the pen. My hand was still trembling, but I pressed the tip to the paper and signed my name. Sam signed his next. Cora signed as our guardian. All right, Bastian said, gathering the papers and tapping them on the table to straighten them. I'm walking these over to the prosecutor's office right now. The arrest warrant for your mother should be signed by a judge within the hour. There will be a uniform standing outside her ICU door by dinner. She isn't walking out of that hospital a free woman. We left the precinct as the sun was starting to set. The sky was a bruised orange, casting long dark shadows across the park. The adrenaline that had carried me through the afternoon was rapidly evaporating, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. Every breath I took delayed, a dull, scraping sensation in my lungs. When we got back to Cora's house, we locked the deadbolt. We drew the curtains. We ate leftover pizza in silence, the weight of what we had just done settling over us like a heavy blanket. We had officially declared war on my mother, and my mother never ever lost. I slept in the guest room again. This time, I didn't wake up until mid-morning. The house was quiet. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the blinds. For a split second, before my brain fully booted up, I forgot. I thought it was just a regular Saturday. Then the ache in my chest flared, and the memory of the precinct, the ozone, the police, all came crashing back down. I walked out to the kitchen. Cora was sitting at the island, a cup of coffee growing cold in front of her. She was staring blankly at a piece of paper on the counter. Morning, I rapped. Cora didn't look up. Sit down. The tone of her voice made my blood run cold. It wasn't the fierce, protective anger from yesterday. It was defeat. I pulled out a bar stool and sat. What is it? Did she get bail? Cora said softly. Bastian called an hour ago. They served the warrant. She's officially in police custody at the hospital. Arraignment is Monday. Then what's wrong? Cora finally looked at me. Her eyes were bloodshot. She slid the piece of paper across the granite counter toward me. It was a thick, legal-sized document. The header at the top read, Family Court of Hessen, Juvenile Division. Below that, my name. Below that, a charge. Aggravated assault of a public servant. School official. I stared the words, my brain refusing to process them. What is this? It's a summons, Cora said, her voice hollow. A deputy dropped it off 20 minutes ago. Principal Sorrell officially filed charges against you for the incident with Mr. Holt yesterday morning. But Officer Declan said he wasn't going to arrest me. I stammered, panic rising in my throat. He told Sorrell it was an asthma attack. Declan didn't arrest you. Sorrell bypassed the local precinct and went directly to the juvenile prosecutor. Cora explained, rubbing her temples. She filed a formal complaint. She claimed you violently attacked a teacher, attempted to steal a controlled substance, and caused a severe disruption to the educational environment. They're charging you with a misdemeanor assault. I just grabbed his wrist. He took my inhaler. I was breathing too fast now. The edges of my vision were blurring. Why did she do this today? After letting us leave? Because Arthur Wyndham called her. Cora said bitterly. I stopped. Wyndham? I checked the school district's public donor registry this morning, Cora said, tapping her phone. Your mother's corporate firm is the largest single donor to the high school STEM program. They fund the new computer lab. They fund Sorrell's discretionary budget. Wyndham knew he couldn't get to me, so he got to Sorrell. To punish me, I asked, feeling sick. Worse, Cora said. She looked like she was about to cry. To discredit you. Before I could ask what she meant, her phone buzzed on the counter. It was Paige, the CPS social worker. Cora answered it on speaker. Paige, tell me you can fix this. Cora, I can't. Paige's voice came through, sounding genuinely distressed. I just got the alert from the juvenile court system. I am so sorry, but my hands are completely tied. She was having an asthma attack, Paige. The teacher stole her medication. Cora yelled, losing her composure. I believe you. I do, Paige said quickly. But the system doesn't care about context until you get in front of a judge. Right now, on paper, your niece has an active, pending charge for a violent offense against a school official. So what does that mean? I asked, leaning closer to the phone. There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line. It means the kinship placement algorithm automatically invalidates the home, Paige said, her voice dropping. Child Protective Services policy strictly prohibits placing a younger, vulnerable minor, Sam, in the same temporary foster home as an older minor with a pending violent criminal charge. The kitchen started to spin. No, Cora whispered. I tried to override it, Paige said defensively. I spent the last hour on the phone with my supervisor. But because the assault happened yesterday, after the abuse incident at the house, they're classifying the niece as a potential escalating flight risk and a danger to the younger sibling. It's a mandatory separation protocol. You are not taking them, Cora said, standing up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I won't let you. Cora, if you interfere, they'll pull both of them from your custody and put them both in the system, Paige warned. Wyndham orchestrated this perfectly. He manufactured a violent charge against the primary witness to destroy the credibility for the criminal trial. And he weaponized CPS policy to rip the kids apart. Where does she have to go? Cora asked, her voice cracking. I have a cell in a group home across the county. It's a secure facility for at-risk girls, Paige said gently. I'm coming over now to handle the transfer. Please, have her pack a bag. If we fight this right now, we lose everything. We have to play the game until Monday. The line clicked dead. I sat completely frozen on the bar stool. The piece of paper with my name and the the word assault sat between us. My mother wasn't just trying to avoid prison. She was systematically dismantling the only safe place I had left. If I stayed with Cora, Sam would be taken away. If I wanted Sam to stay safe, I had to pack a bag and willingly walk into a county lockup for troubled kids. Sam walked into the kitchen. He was holding his Nintendo Switch, but it was powered off. He looked from Cora to me, sensing the catastrophic shift in the room's gravity. "What's going on?" Sam asked, his voice small. Cora looked at me, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. She didn't know how to tell him. I stood up, my chest ached, but I forced my breathing to stay even. "Nothing, Sam," I said, walking past him toward the guest room. "I just have to go away for a few days." I walked into the guest room and pulled my canvas duffel from under the bed. The zipper caught halfway, just like the one on my jacket had, but this time I didn't fight it. I just shoved a few pairs of jeans, some t-shirts, and my toothbrush into the gap. It didn't take long to pack up my life. I didn't have much left to take. I sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the faded floral wallpaper. I listened to the sounds of the house. Cora was in the kitchen, her voice a low, frantic murmur as she paced the hardwood floor, still trying to argue with a system that didn't care. Sam was completely silent. When the doorbell finally rang, it sounded like a funeral toll. I grabbed my duffel bag and walked out to the entryway. Paige was standing in the foyer, looking deeply uncomfortable. She had a clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield. Cora stood between us, her arms crossed tight, her eyes red and puffy. "I'm so sorry, Cora," Paige said softly. "I really am. But the car is running." I didn't say goodbye. I didn't want to make it harder than it already was. I just brushed past Cora, keeping my eyes fixed on the front door, and walked out onto the porch. The afternoon air was warm and smelled like cut grass. I walked down the concrete steps toward Paige's white Ford Fusion parked at the curb. I reached for the door handle. Before my fingers could touch the metal, a dark gray, unmarked sedan turned sharply onto the street. It didn't screech or drift. It wasn't a movie, but it was moving entirely too fast for a residential neighborhood. It pulled up directly behind Paige's car, blocking her in completely. The driver's side door opened, and Detective Bastian stepped out. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore, and his tie was pulled loose. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were sharp and furious. "Drop the bag," Bastian called out, slamming his car door shut. Paige spun around on the sidewalk. "Detective, what are you doing? You know I have a mandatory removal order." "Not anymore, you don't," Bastian interrupted, marching up the driveway. He held up a thick manila envelope. He looked past Paige, locking eyes with Cora, who had just stepped out onto the porch with Sam behind her. "Take her inside, Cora. She's not going anywhere." "What are you talking about?" Paige demanded, her professional composure cracking. "The juvenile court system flagged her placement. The assault charge. The charge is gone," Bastian said, flatly withdrawn, completely expunged from the county system. I stopped dead on the grass. My duffel bag slipped from my shoulder, hitting the ground with a soft thud. "What?" Bastian stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He let out a long, heavy breath, looking between me and Cora. "When I dropped your sworn statements off at the district attorney's office this afternoon," Bastian explained, his voice low and steady. "I sat down with the lead prosecutor, a guy named Keller. He's a hard ass, and he hates Arthur Wyndham more than I do. I told him about the phone call, the settlement offer, the demand fee for the sworn retraction. I told you that wasn't strictly illegal," Cora said, her voice shaking with a fragile, desperate hope. "It wasn't," Bastian agreed. "But when the juvenile assault charge popped up in the system 2 hours later, Keller didn't see a coincidence. He saw a pattern. He saw felony witness retaliation orchestrated by a suspect's attorney." Bastian tapped the manila envelope against his leg. "Keller didn't wait around," Bastian continued, a grim, satisfied smile touching the corner of his mouth. "He sent 2 investigators directly to Principal Silver's office. They didn't ask nicely. They walked in, closed the door, and informed her that if she was filing a false police report at the behest of a criminal defendant to intimidate a key witness, she wasn't just losing her pension. She was looking at 5 years for obstruction of justice." I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What did she say?" "She folded in exactly 3 minutes," Bastian said. "Sorrel admitted that Arthur Wyndham called her on her personal cell phone this morning. He heavily implied that your mother's firm would be pulling all of their STEM funding immediately if the school didn't take a zero-tolerance stance on the violent delinquent who assaulted Mr. Holt." Sorrel panicked. She bypassed me, went straight to the juvenile prosecutor, and filed the complaint to keep the money flowing. Paige let out a sharp gasp, covering her mouth with her hand. "Keller had Sorrel sign a confession and withdraw the complaint on the spot," Bastian said, turning to Paige. "The juvenile charge never officially made it to the docket. It's dead, which means the kinship placement algorithm has nothing to flag. The house is clear." Paige didn't argue. She just looked at her clipboard, then at me, and finally gave a small, genuine smile. "I'll call my supervisor right now and update the file." She turned and walked back to her car. Bastian looked back up at Cora. "Your sister tried to play the system. She just didn't realize that when you pull a stunt like that, the system tends to push back. Keller is formally reporting Wyndham to the state bar for ethics violations." "And your sister?" Bastian's smile faded into something cold and absolute. "The judge overseeing her arraignment on Monday just got a full report on the witness tampering attempt. She is never getting bail." Cora sagged against the porch railing. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking as the sheer relief finally broke her. Sam ran forward and wrapped his arms around her waist, burying his face in her shirt. I just stood on the lawn, staring at the duffel bag at my feet. "Go inside, kid," Bastian said softly. "It's over." I picked up my bag. It felt entirely weightless. I walked up the stairs, past Cora and Sam, and stepped back into the house. The smell of cinnamon and old paper washed over me, and for the first time in 2 days, it actually smelled like home. Monday morning was cold and overcast. The courthouse was a massive, imposing structure of limestone and dark glass. Cora, Sam, and I sat in the second row of the gallery in courtroom 4B. We weren't required to be there. Keller had told us we wouldn't need to testify for months, if at all, but Cora insisted. She said we needed to see it. We needed to know it was real. At 9:15 a.m., the heavy wooden side door opened. A bailiff walked in, followed by my mother. She wasn't wearing her tailored silk blouses or her designer heels. She was wearing a baggy, shapeless Orange County jumpsuit. Her wrists were handcuffed in front of her, the chain linking to a heavy leather belt around her waist. She had a thick white foam medical brace wrapped tightly around her neck to stabilize her damaged throat. She looked pale, she looked old, she looked small. Arthur Wyndham was standing at the defense table, his $3,000 suit looking perfectly pressed, but his posture was rigid, his face pale. He didn't look at us. was led to the table, she turned her head. Her eyes scanned the gallery. They locked onto us. For a second, the old Sylvie was there. The absolute fury, the entitlement, the burning promise that she would make us pay for this. But then she looked at Cora's cold, unflinching stare. She looked at Sam, who didn't shrink back this time, but just sat with his hands folded in his lap. And then she looked at me. I didn't look away. I didn't break. I just sat there, breathing in the cool, conditioned air of the courtroom. My chest didn't hurt. My throat didn't tighten. Her eyes faltered. The fury melted into a sudden raw panic. The realization finally hit her. Her money, her lawyers, her manipulation, none of it had worked. The door was locked, and this time, she was the one trapped inside. The judge hit his gavel, calling the court to order. He didn't even look at Wyndham when he denied bail, citing the severe documented risk of witness intimidation and flight. It took less than 10 minutes. The bailiff grabbed my mother's arm and led her back through the heavy wooden door. She didn't look back. We walked out of the courthouse together. The overcast sky darkened, letting a bright, sharp rays of sunlight cut through the gray. Cora put her keys in the ignition of the Honda, but before she started the car, she turned to look at us in the back seat. Are we okay? She asked, her voice quiet but steady. Sam nodded. We're okay. I reached into my pocket. My fingers brushed against the familiar, worn plastic of the red inhaler. I left it there. I didn't pull it out. I didn't need it. I looked out the window at the city moving past us. Yeah, I said, taking a slow, deep, perfectly clear breath. We're fine.